Welcome to Beyond the Call, where history, leadership, and heroism come alive. Today's story explores Private First Class Dirk John Cornelius Vlug at Limon on Leyte in 1944, a powerful account of courage and responsibility in combat. If you enjoy learning more about military history and extraordinary individuals, you can find more articles, podcasts, and resources at trackpads.com. On a narrow jungle road in the Philippines, Vlug faced an armored threat that could have torn open his battalion's line and smashed through to the vulnerable rear. In a matter of minutes, one infantryman's choices would decide whether that breakthrough happened or died in a wall of fire. Dirk Vlug's path to that moment began in the American Midwest, where small towns and farms shaped habits of steady work and quiet responsibility. Born in Maple Lake, Minnesota in 1916, he later lived in Michigan as war clouds gathered overseas and newspaper headlines carried the names of faraway places. In April 1941, months before Pearl Harbor, he stepped into a recruiting office and joined the United States Army, trading familiar streets for barracks, drill fields, and rifle ranges. Beyond the Call is the Monday feature of Dispatch, U.S. Military History magazine. For Vlug, as for many young men of his generation, the uniform became a bridge from local life to a global conflict. Training turned him from civilian to soldier, teaching him to march in formation, care for his weapon, and work as part of a squad that depended on each person doing their part. He eventually joined the 126th Infantry Regiment of the 32nd Infantry Division, a formation built largely from National Guard units in Michigan and Wisconsin. In the Pacific, that division would spend years in some of the harshest terrain of the war, battling not just the enemy, but disease, heat, and endless mud. The jungle was not simply a backdrop. It was an opponent in its own right. By late 1944, Vlug's division was driving up the Ormoc corridor on Leyte, pushing against Japanese forces determined to hold the island. The Ormoc Road twisted through steep hills and dense vegetation, its narrow curves and choke points ideal for ambushes and counterattacks. Rain turned the roadside ditches into brown pools and softened the ground under every boot. Near the small town of Limon, American units carved out positions around the road and threw up a hasty roadblock to stop any attempt to smash through their line. It was a fragile grip on a vital artery. The enemy chose that stretch of road to launch an armored thrust, sending tanks forward with supporting infantry to test and break the defenses. For the soldiers around the roadblock, the first warning was sound. The low grind of treads, the metallic clatter of moving steel, and then the sudden concussion of tank guns firing into the area. Machine gun bursts swept the roadside, chopping into trees and spraying splinters and earth over men pressed tight behind whatever cover they could find. Rifles and light machine guns crackled back, but everyone knew they could not stop armor for long. If the tanks punched through here, wounded men, supply dumps, and artillery positions behind the front would lie exposed. In that rising chaos, Private First Class Vlug saw the problem clearly and understood that time was running out. Somewhere beyond a bend in the road, 5 enemy tanks were probing forward, feeling for weakness in the line. The rocket launcher near the roadblock offered a way to stop them, but it was a weapon normally served by 2 men and dangerous to use alone. He did not wait for someone else to step up or for orders to spell out every detail. He decided to act. Vlug picked up the launcher, slung 6 rockets over his shoulder, and stepped away from the relative shelter of the roadblock. The move exposed him to the eyes and weapons of the tank crews, who were scanning for any sign of threat in the vegetation and along the road. Each step toward the sound of engines meant less cover and more risk, but also a better chance of a killing shot. When the lead tank came into view, he closed the distance until the weapon's short effective range could be turned into an advantage. Then he braced himself on the muddy roadway, aimed at the looming mass of steel, and fired. The rocket struck the lead tank and turned it into a burning obstacle. Its movement stopped in the narrow road, and its crew killed before they could bring all their weapons to bear. Flames and smoke billowed into the damp air, momentarily disrupting the careful rhythm of the advancing column. The second tank ground forward, its crew dismounting to attack the lone soldier who had just destroyed the point vehicle. Vlug did not freeze. He dropped the launcher long enough to draw his pistol and engage the dismounted troops at close range. In that sudden, deadly exchange, he killed one of the attacking soldiers and forced the others back toward the relative safety of their tank. The pause gave him precious seconds. He reloaded the rocket launcher by himself, a task normally shared, and brought it back into firing position while enemy guns still searched for him. A second rocket roared out and slammed into the next tank, destroying it and adding to the growing jumble of wreckage on the road. 2 armored vehicles now burned where, moments earlier, a confident column had been pushing forward. The remaining 3 tanks tried to recover momentum, moving up among smoke and shattered trees to press the attack against the roadblock. Vlug knew he could not simply stand in one spot and trade fire with them. Using the shallow ditches and thick foliage along the roadside, he shifted position to the flank of the column, seeking a better angle where armor was thinner and fields of fire less favorable to the enemy. This was not a headlong charge. It was a series of deliberate moves made under crushing pressure. From his new position, he fired again, knocking out a 3rd tank and adding another mass of twisted metal to the barricade the enemy had unintentionally built for him. A 4th tank fell as he continued to move and reload, each shot taken at close range where a miss would have left him dangerously exposed. With every explosion, the narrow Ormoc road became more clogged and more hazardous for any further advance. The final tank attempted to push past the burning wrecks, hoping to break through the chaos by speed and determination. Vlug used his last rocket to stop it, sending the vehicle over the side of the road and down a steep embankment. In only a few minutes of concentrated action, 1 infantryman with a shoulder-fired weapon and a pistol had destroyed 5 enemy tanks and crushed an armored thrust that threatened his entire battalion. The roadblock still stood. The line had not been rolled up, and the vulnerable rear areas remained intact. For the soldiers who had watched from cover, the scene was unforgettable. They saw not just exploding vehicles, but a single figure moving through the smoke and fire, choosing each time to step into danger so they could stay in place and fight on. That memory would stay with them long after the smoke cleared. Later, the Medal of Honor citation would capture Vlug's actions in formal language, speaking of conspicuous gallantry and courage above and beyond the call of duty. Those phrases can sound distant, but in this case, they pointed to very real choices. No law or regulation required him to leave the safety of the roadblock and face tanks alone on a jungle road. The citation's mention of advancing under intense fire described moments when he had to stand still long enough to aim, while machine gun bullets and shells ripped into the ground and trees around him. The simple line that he single-handedly destroyed 5 tanks compressed an entire sequence of reloading, repositioning, and adapting to close-range threats. The citation also notes that his actions greatly facilitated the success of his battalion's mission, a reminder that valor is never only about the individual. By stopping the tanks and turning them into wrecked barriers, Vlug protected not just the men at the roadblock, but also the artillery units, supply details, and medical teams behind the front who depended on that road staying in friendly hands. The battalion did not have to abandon positions or divert large reserves to seal a sudden breach. The advance toward Ormoc, already taxed by weather and terrain, could continue without the shock of an armored breakthrough tearing its heart out. One man's decision rippled outward through an entire formation. After the war, Dirk John Cornelius Vlug returned to Michigan and to the challenges of building a civilian life after years in combat zones. Like many veterans of the Pacific, he carried memories of jungle heat, sudden violence, and comrades who did not come home. The Medal of Honor he wore marked him out, yet he also shared in the quiet daily work of his community, joining the generation that tried to turn wartime experience into post-war stability. His name appeared at commemorations, on honor rolls, and in collections that preserved the stories of those who had received the nation's highest decoration for valor. In these settings, the man and the medal stood side by side. Over time, his story became part of the larger narrative of the Pacific War, studied by historians and remembered by those connected to the 32nd Infantry Division and the 126th Infantry Regiment. Memorials, museum exhibits, and written accounts ensured that the episode on the Ormoc Road would not vanish into the anonymity of countless unnamed engagements. For students of military history, his actions offered a clear example of how individual courage can intersect with tactical necessity on a muddy, tree-lined road. For fellow veterans and serving soldiers, it offered a reminder that responsibility sometimes falls without warning on one set of shoulders. His legacy remains a bridge between those who fought then and those who serve and learn today. In the end, Dirk Vlug's story is not only about the destruction of tanks or the awarding of a medal. It is about a quiet soldier who, at a critical moment, chose to walk toward danger so others could survive and continue the fight. When listeners hear his name, it is worth remembering the human being behind the formal phrases of the citation: a son of the Midwest, an infantryman in the Pacific, and a man who met an impossible situation with resolve. His example continues to speak to questions of duty, courage, and the weight of decisions made under fire. That is the heart of Beyond the Call.